There's something powerful about a house that's been empty too long. The silence gets into the walls, settles in like dust. For 3 years. I lived with that kind of quiet, the kind that makes a man forget what another voice sounds like in his own kitchen. This story isn't about how I fell in love, though I suppose that's part of it. It's about what happens when you've locked every door in your heart, buried the key deep, and someone shows up with a crowbar. It's about second chances for folks who thought they'd used up all their chances, and it's about learning that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is just stay. The sorrel mare had been climbing since dawn, picking her way up the mesa where the grass still grew thin and pale, but at least it grew. 4 days Silas had been up there with the herd, rationing water from a canteen that ran dry yesterday noon, eating jerky so hard it hurt his teeth. The sun had baked him down to leather and dust, coming down the long slope toward home, his tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. The ranch sat in the hollow below 3 buildings barely visible through the heat shimmer. Barn, chicken coop, the house. All of it bleached gray by the Texas sun, quiet as a graveyard. Then he saw it. Smoke. Thin gray thread rising from his chimney, clear against the white sky. Silas pulled the mare up short, stared, blinked hard. 4 days without decent water could make a man see things that weren't there. But when he opened his eyes, the smoke was still rising, steady as a heartbeat. His chimney had been cold for 3 years. The mare sensed his tension, sidestepped, snorted. He touched his heels to her flanks and she started down. Faster now. His heart hammered against his ribs. Not fear exactly, but something close to it, something that felt like hope, and that was more dangerous than fear ever was. Half a mile out, he could smell it. Wood smoke, mesquite burning, and under that bread, cornbread, unless he'd gone completely mad from the sun. He slowed the mare at the fence line. The gate stood open. He never left it open. Hogs would get through. Fresh broom marks swept across the porch boards, the kind of marks that came from a stiff brush and someone who cared about corners. He hadn't swept that porch since he couldn't remember when. Through the wavy glass of the front window, lamplight glowed yellow warm in the afternoon dimness. A shadow moved inside. Not tall, woman-shaped. Silas dismounted, his legs unsteady after 4 days in the saddle. He tied the mare to the hitching post with hands that had started shaking. The post was solid under his palm, real wood. Real rope, so this wasn't fever dreams. Someone was in his house. He crossed the porch in 3 steps, those boards he'd meant to replace for 2 years creaking under his boots. His hand found the door latch. The metal was warm. He pushed. The door swung open on hinges he'd oiled last spring. That smell hit him full force, cornbread baking. Beans cooking with salt pork. Coffee so strong it made his empty stomach clench. His kitchen, but different. Clean. The cast-iron stove glowing red through its isinglass window, heat rippling the air above it. A woman stood at his stove. Not young past 30, he'd guess. Not old. She wore a faded calico dress, blue with small white flowers, an apron tied around her waist, dark hair pinned up practical. Not pretty. Work-roughened hands held a wooden spoon, dripping bean liquor back into the pot. She turned, met his eyes without flinching. "Mr. Garrett?" Not a question. A statement, like she'd been expecting him. Silas stood in his own doorway, hat crushed between both hands, 4 days of dust coating him head to boot. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She turned back to the stove, lifted the lid on the Dutch oven. Steam rose, carrying the scent of biscuits, real biscuits, the kind with butter. "You'll want to wash up," she said. Not looking at him. Her voice was steady, low, Eastern accent underneath Ohio, maybe Pennsylvania. "Supper's near ready." She moved to the table, his table, the one Sarah had made him sand smooth before they married, set down 2 plates, blue enamel. His mother's plates, the ones Sarah had used for Sunday dinners, wrapped in newspaper and put away the day after the funeral because he couldn't stand to look at them. This woman had unwrapped them, set them out like she had the right. She spooned beans onto one plate, then the other. Sliced cornbread, steam rising from the golden interior, poured coffee from the graniteware pot into 2 tin cups. All of it done with the confidence of someone who belonged. Someone who'd made these movements 100 times before in this exact kitchen. Silas found his voice, though it came out rough as tree bark. "Who are you?" She looked up then. Her eyes were gray, or maybe green, hard to tell in the lamplight. There were lines at the corners, tired lines, the kind that came from crying or not crying. He couldn't tell which. "Clara Hayes." She gestured to the second chair, the one that hadn't been pulled out in 3 years. "Sit down before you fall down. You look half dead." He should have demanded answers, should have asked what gave her the right to walk into his house, use his stove, touch his dead wife's dishes, should have told her to get out. Instead, he hung his hat on the peg by the door, crossed to the washstand freshly filled. He noted, the water clean, scrubbed his hands and face while she served the food. The silence broken only by the scrape of the wooden spoon against enamel, the pop and hiss of mesquite in the stove. When he sat, the chair creaked under him. She'd already taken her seat, hands folded in her lap, waiting. He picked up his fork. The beans were perfect soft, but not mushy, seasoned with just enough salt. The cornbread melted on his tongue. He hadn't tasted food this good since. He didn't finish that thought. They ate in silence. The only sounds were fork against plate, the fire settling in the stove, the mare outside stamping flies. Clara Hayes ate slowly, deliberately, her eyes on her food. Not looking at him, but aware of him. The way a person is aware of a stranger in close quarters, when his plate was empty. She refilled it without asking, poured more coffee. He let her. Finally, when the food was gone and the coffee cups drained, Silas leaned back in his chair, looked at this woman who'd made herself at home in his empty house. "I'll ask again," he said. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" Clara Hayes reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a folded paper, creased and worn like it had been read many times, set it on the table between them. He recognized his own handwriting. "Your letter said mid-July. Mr. Garrett." Her voice was steady, but he saw the tremor in her hands as she smoothed the paper flat. "I read early July. The postal rider in town said you were up Mesa with the herd, so I let myself in." The letter, the one he'd written 6 weeks ago in a moment of weakness, when the silence in this house had gotten so loud he couldn't stand it anymore, the one he'd sent to the matrimonial bureau in Kansas City. He'd asked for a housekeeper. They'd sent him a wife. If this story finds you in your own kitchen, maybe with your own cup of coffee, I'd be grateful to know where you're reading from. Sometimes it helps to know we're all finding our way home from different places. Silas stared at the letter. His words, written in lamplight at this same table 6 weeks back. He'd crossed out 3 versions before settling on the final draft. Seeking housekeeper. Room and board provided. Ranch work required. No promises beyond honest work for honest keep. He'd never used the word wife. Clara's thumb moved across the paper, smoothing a crease that wouldn't smooth. Your letter said you needed help with the house. I can do that. Her hands told a different story than her dress. Calluses thick across the palms, nails cut short, practical. One knuckle scarred white where something had healed crooked. These weren't hands that poured tea in parlors. The Postal Service made a mistake, he said. I know. She folded the letter. Precise creases. Tucked it back in her apron. But I'm here now. Came 3 days of train and 2 days of stage. Spent my last dollar on the fare. The words sat heavy between them. No money to go back. That's what she wasn't saying. Silas pushed his chair back. The legs scraped against floorboards she'd swept clean. He could see the grain of the wood for the first time in months. I'll show you where you'll sleep. He led her through the kitchen to the lean-to room off the back. Used to be Sarah's sewing space before. The narrow iron bed was still there. Frame painted white, but chipped now, showing rust underneath. Washstand in the corner. One window facing east where nothing grew but scrub oak and red dirt. Clara set her carpet bag on the bed. The rope supports creaked, loud in the small space. She ran her hand over the quilt star pattern. Faded blue. This'll do fine. She didn't ask about the Singer sewing machine gathering dust in the corner, didn't ask about the spool of thread still wound on the bobbin, waiting for hands that would never touch it again. Silas stepped back into the doorway. 6 months, that's the trial. Either one of us wants out before then. No questions asked. All right. I can pay wages. Room and board is enough. Her voice was flat, final. For now. He nodded. Started to leave, then turned back. Why'd you come? Real reason. Clara looked at him then, straight on. Those gray-green eyes holding something he recognized because he saw it every morning in his shaving mirror. Same reason you wrote that letter, I expect. She sat on the bed, started unlacing her boots. Got tired of being alone in a dying place. The ropes creaked as she shifted her weight. Through the thin plank wall, he'd hear every movement she made tonight, every breath. His throat closed around words he couldn't form. He backed out, pulled the door most of the way shut, not latched, just closed enough for privacy. In his own room, their room, the one Sarah died in, Silas sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing his boots. Through the wall came small sounds, her weight settling on the corn husk mattress, a cough, dry and deep, the kind that came from breathing too much train smoke and prairie dust. He lay back without undressing, stared at the ceiling beams he could trace in the dark. Outside, coyotes started their chorus. Inside, through the wall. Clara Hayes coughed again, and Silas realized he'd forgotten to ask where her husband was. Coffee smell woke him. Silas opened his eyes to gray dawn light through the window and the certainty that someone else was awake in his house, had been awake long enough to start a fire. Grind beans, set the pot to boil. He pulled on his boots. Same clothes as yesterday. stepped into the kitchen. Clara stood at the stove, her back to him. She'd already dressed. Hair pinned up tight. Same blue calico as last night. The coffee pot steamed on the hottest part of the cast iron. "Morning," she said, not turning around. He grunted, reached for a cup from the shelf. She poured for him. Then herself. Her hands were steady on the pot handle. No tremor, no hesitation in his kitchen like there'd been in hers in the lean-to last night. "Chickens are fed," she said. Silas stopped with the cup halfway to his mouth. "What? The 3 hens? Found scratch grain in the barn?" She sipped her coffee. "Betty's the friendly one. Mabel's skittish. Red pecked me twice." He set his cup down. "You named my chickens. They ought to have names. They're livestock." Clara's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Betty still ought to have a name. He didn't have an answer for that. He drank his coffee instead. It was good. Strong enough to scrape rust off iron. The way he liked it. Sarah used to make it weak. Said his way was wasteful. Clara moved to the dry sink, started cracking eggs into a bowl. 3 of them. And one more she pulled from her apron pocket. "Found this one yesterday under the roost. Betty's a hider." She whisked the eggs with a fork, poured them into the skillet with a piece of salt pork already sizzling. The smell made his stomach wake up hard and demanding. She set a plate in front of him, scrambled eggs, grits with a pool of red-eye gravy in the center, 2 biscuits left from last night. Warmed up. He ate. She ate. The sun came up orange through the east window, painting the table in slanted light. Dust motes drifted in the beam. He watched them while he chewed. When his plate was clean, Clara stood, went to the shelf where he kept paper and pencils for ranch tallies, came back with a folded sheet. She set it on the table between them, smoothed it flat with both palms. 8 lines of writing. Neat script, each letter formed careful. Numbers down the left side. South fence hogs getting through. Roof patch leaked last rain. Porch, step 3rd, 1, rotted rainwater catch cistern low. Vegetable plot, soil needs turning, henhouse repair. North wall loose interior, whitewash kitchen. Bedroom, curtains, windows. All. Silas read it once, read it again, looked up at her. "You walked my property?" "Yes." "When?" "Yesterday, while you were gone." She met his eyes. "So I'd know what I was staying for." His jaw worked. The fence had been bad since spring. The roof since '82. He'd been meaning to fix the porch step for he couldn't remember how long. Long enough that he walked around it without thinking. "I got lumber," he said. "In the barn. Been meaning to. I saw it." Course she had. She'd walked every foot of his land, taken inventory, written it down in order of what mattered most. Hogs getting through the fence that was stock loss. Money, roof patch that was shelter, porch step that was safety, curtains were last. He folded the paper, creased it sharp, handed it back. "South fence first. Meet me there. Come noon." She nodded, took the paper, tucked it in her apron pocket next to his letter. The sun was near overhead when Silas reached the south fence line. The break was obvious 3 rails down, cedar posts leaning drunk, hog tracks in the soft dirt on both sides. He'd lost 2 shoats through this gap last month, found them a week later 3 miles south at Henderson's place. He dropped his tool sack, pulled out the hammer, nails, post hole digger. A sound made him turn. Clara coming across the pasture, not empty-handed, dragging something heavy through the grass, both hands wrapped around it. Cedar post, 8 feet long. She'd hauled it from the barn, quarter-mile at least. She dropped it at his feet, stopped to catch her breath. One hand pressed to her lower back, then turned and headed back toward the barn. "Where are you going?" "Need 11 more. She didn't look back. By the time she'd dragged the second post across, he'd pulled the broken one out of the ground. The hole was there, waiting. She set the new post next to it, wiped sweat from her forehead with her sleeve, then left for the third. He wanted to tell her to stop. This was his work, his fence, his land. But she was already halfway to the barn, halfway back. Her hands were blistered raw, but she didn't slow. On the 7th post, she stopped, pulled a length of baling twine from her pocket, tied her skirt up above her ankles. The fabric bunched awkward, but her legs could move free now. She caught him looking. "Easier this way." He dropped his eyes, picked up the post hole digger. By the time she had all 12 posts lined up, he'd dug 4 new holes. The old ones were too worn, wouldn't hold. She picked up the first post without asking, held it vertical in the hole, stood there, arms straining against the weight, keeping it straight while sweat darkened her dress between her shoulder blades. He packed dirt around the base, tamped it down with the blunt end of the digger, tested it. Solid. She moved to the next hole. They worked. No talking. Just the rhythm of it, her holding. Him packing. Both moving to the next. The sun climbed west. Sweat ran into his eyes. His shoulders burned. Her hands on the cedar posts turned white-knuckled. By late afternoon, with shadows stretching long across the pasture, they'd reset 12 posts. The fence line stood straight again. Silas walked to the water bucket he'd brought, pulled out the dipper, drank deep. The water was warm, tasted like tin and alkali. He held out the dipper to Clara. She took it. Their fingers brushed on the handle. Hers were rough as tree bark, sticky with blood from burst blisters. She drank, handed it back. The metal was wet from her mouth and his. He dipped it again, drank, tasted her on the rim. She was watching his hands where they gripped the dipper, looking at something specific. His left hand, 4th finger, the band of pale skin where his wedding ring used to be. Her eyes came up to his face, gray-green in the hard sunlight. Asking a question she wasn't speaking out loud. And Silas realized she'd noticed last night. Had seen it then and said nothing. Was seeing it now and still saying nothing. But she was waiting for an answer he didn't know how to give. The rest of the first week passed in the same rhythm. By day 7, Silas woke to coffee already perking on the stove. The smell worked through the thin wall before the light did. He lay there listening to Clara move in the kitchen, bare feet on the floorboards. The soft clank of the poker stirring coals, water sloshing as she filled the pot. He pulled on his pants, stepped into the kitchen. She was at the stove, same as yesterday, same as the day before. Her hair was down, dark and tangled from sleep, not pinned up yet. She glanced over her shoulder. "Morning," he grunted. Saw the kindling box by the stove. Full. He'd filled it last night after she'd gone to bed. She saw him looking. Poured his coffee. set it on the table at his usual spot. He drank. She dressed her hair, twisting it up and pinning it without a mirror, hands moving through the routine blind. When she turned back around, she looked like herself again, put together, ready. They ate cornmeal mush with molasses. Outside, the rooster crowed late. Blue, his half-heeler cattle dog, scratched at the door. Silas let him in. The dog went straight to Clara, pressed his nose into her palm. She scratched behind his ears. Blue's tail wagged. "Traitor," Silas said. Clara's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. After breakfast, she cleared the plates. He went out to check the stock. When he came back an hour later, his work shirt, the one with the torn shoulder seam, was hanging on the porch rail. Drying. She'd washed it. He lifted it, checked the shoulder. The tear was mended. Neat stitches in thread that almost matched. She'd done it sometime between dawn and now. Inside, the kitchen smelled different, sharper, vinegar. She'd moved things. The tin plates from the top shelf to the middle, the cups closer to the stove, the cornmeal crock next to the biscuit tin instead of across the room. He stood in the middle of his own kitchen and didn't recognize the arrangement. Clara came in from the lean-to, her arms full of folded linens. "Moved some things," she said. Didn't apologize. Didn't ask permission. He opened his mouth, closed it. She was right this way made more sense. Saved steps. Saved reaching. "Better this way," he said. She nodded. Set the linens on the shelf. On the mantel. Something caught his eye. The walnut frame. The one he'd put face down in the drawer 2 years ago because he couldn't stand looking at it anymore. Sarah's tintype. Standing upright again. Clara was at the dry sink, washing her hands. Not looking at him, not acknowledging what she'd done. Silas picked up the frame. Sarah stared back at him, unsmiling like everyone in photographs, her hand resting on the back of a chair. Young. She'd been so young. He set it back on the mantel, left it standing. That afternoon, Clara made coffee, poured his cup, tasted hers. Her face twisted. "That's bad." He tried his bitter as lye soap. "Too much grounds, not enough water. Real bad." He agreed. She looked at him. He looked at her. Her mouth twitched. His did too. Neither of them laughed. But it was close. Closer than he'd come in 3 years. She dumped the pot, started over. The next morning, she made it perfect again. 4 more days passed. The rhythm settled deeper. She rose first, made coffee. He stacked kindling before bed. She washed. He chopped. She cooked. He ate. Neither spoke much, but the silence had changed shape. Didn't press so hard anymore. On the 5th afternoon, Silas came in from the barn carrying a mason jar. The glass was dusty. The zinc lid rusted at the edges. Inside, paper packets, faded writing on each one. He set it on the table where Clara was rolling out biscuit dough. She looked at the jar, at him, back to the jar. "For the garden," he said. "If you still want to plant one." He left before she could answer. Outside. He leaned against the barn wall. His hands were shaking. Sarah's seeds. He'd kept them 10 years. Couldn't bring himself to plant them. Couldn't bring himself to throw them away. Through the window, he saw Clara pick up the jar, turn it in her hands, open the lid. She lifted out one packet, held it close to read the faded ink. Kentucky Wonder Beans. S.G. 1874. 10 years ago. Sarah's handwriting. The year before she died. Clara set that packet down. Picked up another. Yellow squash. S.G. 1874. Another. Tomatoes. S.G. 1874. Sarah's garden. Sarah's seeds that never got planted because she died before spring came. Clara closed the jar. Carried it outside. Silas straightened. Ready to, he didn't know what. She walked past him to the plot she'd marked off behind the chicken coop. Started breaking ground with the hoe. The red clay fought every strike. She swung. The blade bit shallow. She swung again. He should help, should take the hoe from her. It was man's work. He went back to the barn instead, found the ash bucket from the stove, carried it to the garden, dumped it on the hard clay. She stopped, watched him. He didn't explain, just went back for another bucket. By the third bucket, she understood. Started working the ash into the soil with the hoe, breaking up the clay, making it soft enough to hold roots. They worked until the plot was ready. Neither speaking, just moving. That evening after supper, Clara sat at the table with his torn work shirt, a different one, ripped at the elbow, threaded her needle, started mending. Silas sat on the floor by the stove, took out his saddle, a tin of neat's foot oil, a rag. Started working oil into the dry leather. The lamp flickered. The clock on the mantel ticked. Blue snored by the door. Clara spoke first. Her needle kept moving, in and out of the fabric. Ohio was hills, green hills. It rained every week. She didn't look up, just kept stitching. Silas rubbed oil into the stirrup leather. His hands moved automatic, long, quiet. Then his voice came out, rough from not using it much. My pa ran 2,000 head before the fever came through. Texas fever. Took the cattle first, then jumped to people. Buried 14 folks that summer. Couldn't get them in ground fast enough. Ground was too hard from drought. The needle stopped, hung there mid-stitch, then started again. I was married before, Clara said. 4 years. Past tense. Was. Silas kept his eyes on the saddle. Sarah was my wife. 10 years back. Was. Not is. The room held those words, turned them over. Neither of them said more, didn't need to. The shape of the thing was clear enough. Clara bit off her thread, folded the shirt, set it aside. I'm going to check on the chickens before bed. She stood, crossed to the door, stopped with her hand on the latch. The seeds, she said, not looking at him. I'll plant them careful. She went out. The door closed soft behind her. Silas sat on the floor with his saddle and his oil rag, and the ghost of his dead wife standing on the mantel. Through the window, he watched Clara's lamplight move toward the henhouse, and realized he didn't know her dead husband's name. 3 weeks in, the cistern line came up wet only 2 feet from the bottom. Silas stood at the edge, the rope dripping in his hands. The stone weight swung slow, tapping against the rock wall below. 2 feet, maybe 100 gallons left. 3 days of water if they were careful. Less in this heat. Clara's shadow fell across the cistern mouth. She didn't ask. Looked at the wet mark on the rope. Looked at his face. Understood. Creek's 3 miles south, he said. Gonna need to haul water. I'll go with you. We can carry more that way. He started to say no. 12-mile round trip in a wagon, heat index already pushing 100. Be worse by noon. She was already walking toward the barn. I'll hitch the wagon. The Springfield wagon was older than he was. Hickory frame. Iron-rimmed wheels that needed greasing. He threw 4 oak barrels in the bed while Clara backed the draft horse into the traces. Her hands worked the buckles without fumbling. She'd done this before. They rolled out at 7. The sun was already white-hot. No mercy in it. Dust rose from the wheels, hung in the still air. The horse plodded south, head low, sides already dark with sweat. Silas drove. Clara sat beside him on the bench, one hand braced on the seat rail. Neither spoke. The wagon creaked. The trace chains clinked. Cicadas screamed in the mesquite. Half a mile out, they passed a steer carcass. Been dead maybe a week. Hide stretched tight over ribs. Eye sockets empty. Vultures had cleaned it down to leather and bone. Clara looked at it, looked away, kept looking ahead. 2 miles out, the mesquite trees were dead, gray skeletons against white sky, bark peeling in long strips, no leaves, no life. The creek bed showed itself as a darker line across the red earth. Used to run 6 feet deep in spring. Now it was a trickle, maybe 6 inches wide, soaking into sand as fast as it appeared. Silas pulled the wagon up at the bank, set the brake, climbed down. His boots sank into sand that used to be underwater. He pulled the first barrel off the wagon, rolled it to the creek, tipped it on its side. Water crept in, slow as cold molasses. The barrel gurgled, swallowed, took its time. Clara sat on a flat rock at the water's edge, pulled off her bonnet. Her face was red, sweat running down her temples. They waited. The sun climbed. The barrel filled 1 inch, 2, 3, 40 minutes for the first barrel. Silas pulled it out. Heavy now, water sloshing. Rolled it back to the wagon, started the second. Clara hadn't moved. Sat staring at the creek like it might tell her something. I was married before, she said, not looking at him, looking at the water. 4 years. Thomas was his name. The second barrel gurgled. Drinking. He died of typhoid, burned up with fever in 3 days. His family said, her voice caught, she swallowed, said I didn't nurse him right, didn't pray hard enough, said I killed him with my not caring. The water trickled. The barrel filled another inch. His mother put it in the newspaper. Death notice said, Thomas Hayes, beloved son, taken by fever and neglect. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. She picked up a pebble, threw it in the creek. It disappeared without a splash. Came west because I couldn't bear their faces anymore. The way they looked at me in church, in the mercantile, like I'd put a pillow over his face myself. Silas pulled the second barrel out, started the third. His hands were shaking. He gripped the barrel rim to steady them. Sarah died birthing our daughter, he said. The words came out flat, factual, like he was reporting on a fence that needed fixing. Both of them in one night. Midwife said the baby was turned wrong. Nothing to be done. The third barrel drank, slow, patient. I held Sarah's hand while she... His jaw locked. He had to force it open. While both of them died. She kept asking me to save the baby, kept asking. I couldn't do nothing but watch. His throat closed. He couldn't get more words past it. Clara's voice was quiet. How old was she? 22. Baby never got a name. Didn't seem right to name her when she never drew breath. The barrel was half full now, water creeping up the sides. Buried them together, Silas said. Same box. Couldn't stand the thought of them being apart. He stopped. Couldn't go on. That was 10 years back, 1874. Clara nodded. Thomas died in 82, 2 years ago. They sat with that, the numbers, the years between death and now, the space they'd each carried alone. Silas pulled out the third barrel, started the fourth, last one. They didn't speak while it filled, just sat in the heat, watching water that wouldn't hurry no matter how much they needed it to. When the fourth barrel was full, Silas heaved it onto the wagon, secured all four with rope so they wouldn't shift. Clara climbed up on the bench. He took the reins. The wagon lurched forward, headed north. The horse strained against the added weight. 1,200 pounds of water, give or take. The wheels cut deep ruts in the sand. They were a mile from home when the rear left wheel hit a hole. The wagon jerked sideways. Hard. Clara yelled, "The barrel!" Silas saw it, the rear barrel tipping, 30 gallons pulling toward the edge of the wagon bed. The rope holding it was stretching. About to give. He hauled on the reins. The wagon stopped. He was over the seat, into the bed, Clara right behind him. They both grabbed the barrel, his hands under it, trying to lift, her hands on top, pushing it back upright, water sloshing inside, fighting them, the weight of it pulling down, pulling sideways. The barrel rim was wet, slippery. His grip started to slip. Clara threw her weight against it, leaned her whole body into the push. He felt her shoulder against his back, her hands next to his on the wet wood. Together they shoved. The barrel rocked, settled, stopped pulling. They stood there, breathing hard, both soaked. Water had splashed over the rim, soaked their shirts, run down into their boots. His hands were still on the barrel, her hands on top of his. He could feel her pulse through her palms. Fast, matching his. 5 seconds. 10. Neither moved. Her fingers were rough against his, calloused, real, warm even through the cold water. She pulled her hands away, climbed back onto the bench, sat down, stared straight ahead. Silas retied the barrel, checked the other 3, all secure. He climbed back onto the bench beside her, picked up the reins, clicked his tongue. The horse started forward. They rode the last mile in silence, Clara's wet sleeve pressed against his. The wagon creaked. The barrels sloshed quiet behind them. When they pulled into the yard, the sun was dropping west, orange light painting everything gold. The house, the barn, the cistern where this had started. Silas set the brake, climbed down, started unloading barrels. Clara helped. They worked without speaking. Rolled each barrel to the cistern, poured the water in. It splashed down into darkness. The sound echoed up hollow. 4 barrels, 120 gallons, maybe a week of water if they were careful. When the last barrel was empty, Clara carried it back to the barn, hung it on its peg. Silas stood at the cistern, dropped the weighted line, let it sink. pulled it up. The wet mark was 4 feet from the bottom now. 4 feet. Better than 2, but not enough, not close to enough. He coiled the rope, looked toward the house. Clara was on the porch, pumping water from the cistern they'd just filled, washing her hands and face. Her dress was still wet from the barrel, sticking to her back. She looked up, met his eyes across the yard. That evening, neither had strength for more than cold beans and hard bread. They sat on the porch steps, too exhausted to speak, muscles trembling from the strain of hauling 1,000 pounds of water in 100-degree heat. The stars came out, the coyotes started up, blue lay between them, chin on his paws. Clara's hands rested on her knees, blistered raw from rope and wood and weight, and Silas realized she'd told him how her husband died, but she'd never said why she'd answered his letter instead of someone else's. 4 weeks in, Clara's garden showed green, 8 rows of it, thin shoots breaking through red clay that had no business growing anything. Silas saw them when he came back from checking the fence line. Tiny leaves pushing up toward light, defiant. Clara was on her knees in the dirt, a bucket beside her, dishwater from breakfast. She tipped it slow along the first row, letting it soak in before moving to the next. Every drop measured. Every drop counted. He watched from the barn door, the way her hands touched the leaves, gentle, like she was petting something alive that might startle. She moved to the tomato row. The plants were showing their first true leaves, maybe 2 inches tall, too small to stand alone in wind. They needed support. Silas turned back into the barn, found the mesquite wood he'd been saving. Termite resistant. Hard enough to last 10 years in ground. He pulled out 8 pieces, took them to the workbench, cut them to 3 feet, sanded the rough edges so they wouldn't splinter her hands when she tied the plants up later, sharpened the ends to points. When she came in from the garden, he was gone. The stakes were propped against the garden fence, 8 of them. Cut, sanded, ready, at supper. She served him an extra biscuit, didn't say anything, just set it on his plate and sat down. He ate it. She ate hers. The biscuit was thanks. He understood. The next morning, the tomato plants were tied up, strips of old flour sacking wrapped around stems and stakes, supporting them, keeping them straight. 2 days later, Silas dragged the ladder out of the barn, 20 feet of cottonwood poles lashed together with rope, heavy, unwieldy. He leaned it against the house, tested the rungs. They held. The roof had leaked since '82. 3 years of putting it off, 3 years of setting buckets in the bedroom when it rained, which wasn't often. But when it did, Clara came out on the porch, looked at him, looked at the ladder. "I'll go up," he said. "You hand me the tar paper." She crossed her arms. "How's your balance? Good enough? When's the last time you climbed something this high?" He didn't answer, couldn't remember. She uncrossed her arms, walked to the base of the ladder, wrapped both hands around the poles. "Go on then, I'll hold it steady." He picked up the roll of tar paper. Pine pitch in a can. Brush. Started climbing. The ladder shifted under his weight. Clara's hands tightened on the poles, holding firm. He climbed, rung by rung. Didn't look down. The roof came up to meet him. Hot shingles. Sun-baked. He swung his leg over the peak, straddled it, set down his materials. The hole was there. 6 inches across. Been there so long the wood around it was rotted black. Rain had soaked through, stained the bedroom ceiling below. He brushed pitch around the edges, laid the tar paper over it, smoothed it flat, brushed more pitch to seal the seams. Below, Clara's voice. "Careful on that peak." "I'm fine. Don't need you breaking your neck." He almost smiled, didn't, finished sealing the patch. The tar paper gleamed black in the sun, waterproof. Should last another 3 years if he was lucky. He was reaching for the second piece of tar paper when the light changed. Went dim, like something had passed in front of the sun. He looked up. West sky was building clouds, tall ones, white on top, gray underneath, moving fast. Thunder rumbled, still far off, but coming. "Silas!" Clara's voice had changed, sharp now, urgent. "Get down! Almost done! Now!" The wind hit, came from nowhere. 1 second, still air. Next second, the ladder was swaying. Clara's whole body leaned into it, trying to keep it upright. "I'm coming!" He shoved the materials aside, swung his leg over the peak, found the top rung with his boot. The first drops hit. Big, heavy, warm. They smacked the shingles like thrown pebbles. He climbed down fast. The rungs were slick now. His hands slipped. He caught himself. Kept going. Halfway down. The rain opened up, a wall of it, solid. He couldn't see the ground. Couldn't see Clara. Just water. His boot hit the bottom rung. The ground. Clara's hands on his arm, pulling him clear. The ladder fell sideways, crashed into the mud that was already forming. Rain hammered down, soaked through his shirt in seconds, through his pants, his boots filled with water. Clara stood 3 feet away, drenched, hair plastered to her face, dress stuck to her body. She was looking up, mouth open, letting rain hit her tongue. Then she laughed, not a small laugh, full-throated, head back, arms out, spinning in a circle in the mud. The sound of it caught in his chest. Squeezed. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard someone laugh like that. Free. Unguarded. Real. She stopped spinning. Looked at him. Still laughing. "It's raining. I noticed. It's actually raining." He looked at the garden. Water pooling in the rows. The plants drinking. Soaking it up after weeks of dishwater and careful rationing. Getting what they needed? Finally. He looked at the cistern. The overflow pipe at the top. Water was starting to run out of it. First time in 2 years. The cistern was filling. Actually filling. Something in his throat loosened. Came unstuck. He opened his mouth. Let rain hit his face. Tasted it. Sweet. Clean. Nothing like cistern water that had sat too long. Clara was watching him, grinning. Water running down her face. Her dress was torn at the hem. Mud splashed up her legs to her knees. She looked happy. She looked happy. He started laughing. Couldn't help it. Sounded strange to his own ears. Rusty. Like machinery that hadn't run in years, but it came out anyway. They stood in the rain, both laughing. The garden between them drinking deep. Thunder rolled overhead. Lightning split the sky south. The storm was right on top of them. "We should get inside," he said. "Probably." Neither of them moved. Finally, Clara ran for the porch. Silas followed. They stood under the overhang, dripping. Puddles forming at their feet. The rain drummed on the new roof, not leaking. The patch held. Clara's teeth were chattering, not from cold, from something else, her whole body shaking. "Inside," Silas said. "You need to dry off." They went in. He grabbed towels from the shelf, handed her one. She pressed it to her face, her hair. It came away soaked. He peeled off his shirt, wrung it out over the wash basin. Water poured out. He hung it on the back of a chair by the stove. Started building up the fire. The coals were still hot. He added kindling. It caught. Flames licked up. Clara was wringing out her skirt, not taking it off, just twisting the fabric, squeezing water onto the floor. Her arms were bare. The sleeves of her dress had shrunk up wet. He could see the pale skin of her forearms, the muscle moving underneath. He looked away, fed more wood to the fire. She moved to the stove, held her hands out to the heat. Steam rose from her dress, from her hair. He stood on the other side of the stove, both of them drying, both pretending not to watch the other. The coffee pot was on the shelf. Clara reached for it, filled it with fresh water from the bucket, the cistern water, added grounds, set it on the stove. They waited for it to boil. The rain hammered outside. The fire crackled. Steam rose from both of them. When the coffee was ready, Clara poured 2 cups, handed him one. He wrapped both hands around it. The heat burned his palms. Good, real, solid. She sipped hers. He sipped his. Strong. Hot. Perfect. "You don't gotta stay the full 6 months, he said. The words came out before he planned them, before he thought them through. Clara went still, the cup halfway to her lips. She lowered it, looked at him. His throat was tight. He forced the rest out. "I mean, if you wanted to stay longer, you could. If you wanted." The rain drummed. The fire popped. The coffee steamed between them. Clara's hands were shaking. Not much. Just a tremor. She set her cup down on the table. "I might," her voice was quiet, careful. "I might want that." She picked up her cup again, drank, didn't look at him. Silas nodded. That was enough. That was something. He drank his coffee. The heat of it spread through his chest, warmed places that had been cold so long he'd forgotten they could feel anything else. Outside. The rain kept falling. The cistern kept filling. The garden kept drinking. Clara moved to the window, looked out at the water running down the glass. "How long you think it'll last?" she asked. "The rain hour, maybe. 2 if we're lucky. And the water in the cistern," he calculated. 4 feet before. The overflow pipe was running now. Had to be near full. "Week, maybe more." She nodded, kept looking out the window. He stood beside her, not touching. Just close enough to see what she was seeing. The yard turning to mud. The chickens huddled under the coop overhang. Blue lying on the porch, nose on his paws, watching the rain like it was the most interesting thing he'd ever seen. Clara's shoulder was inches from his. He could feel the heat coming off her, steam still rising from her dress. "Sarah," she said. Not a question. Just the name. "What about her? She plant those seeds, the ones in the jar?" "Yeah, spring of 74. Never got them in the ground. She died in March, before planting season." Clara was quiet. Then, "I'll take good care of them. The plants, I promise." His throat closed again. He swallowed hard, nodded. They stood at the window, watching rain that wouldn't last. Couldn't last. Never did in this country. But for now, it was falling. For now. The cistern was filling. For now. There was enough. Clara's hand moved on the windowsill, her fingers spread, resting there. His hand was a foot away. He could close that distance, could touch her fingers with his, could find out if her skin was as warm as it looked. He didn't move. She didn't move. The rain slowed, stopped. The sun broke through clouds to the west. Orange light flooded the yard. Clara turned from the window, looked at him. Her eyes were gray-green in the strange light, darker than usual, deeper. "Thank you," she said, "for the steaks. You're welcome." She walked back to the lean-to, closed the door most of the way, not latched, just closed. Silas stood at the window. The sun was setting. The yard was mud and puddles. The garden was green. The cistern was full. And he realized he'd just asked her to stay, and she'd said maybe. 6 weeks in. Silas was mending harness in the barn when he heard hoofbeats. Fast, coming from the east road. He stepped out into the yard. Dust plume, rising a 1/4 mile off. Single rider. Nobody came out here unless they had reason. Clara was at the garden, hoeing between the tomato rows. She straightened, shaded her eyes, watched the rider come. The man pulled up at the gate. Young, maybe 20. Sorrel gelding lathered white around the bit, mail pouch slung across his saddle. "Letter for Mrs. Clara Hayes." He was already pulling an envelope from the pouch. "Forwarded from Dayton, Ohio." Clara's hoe dropped, hit the dirt without a sound. She walked to the fence. Slow, like she was moving through water. The rider held out the envelope. She took it. Her hand was shaking. "Need you to sign." He handed her a ledger, a pencil. She signed. Her signature came out crooked. Wrong. "Got any water rode hard from town?" Silas pumped the cistern while Clara stood there holding the letter. The rider drank 2 dippers full, nodded his thanks, rode out the way he'd come. The dust settled. Clara hadn't moved. Just stood at the fence holding that envelope. White paper. Her name written across it in handwriting Silas didn't recognize. She turned, walked to the house, went inside. The door closed behind her. Silas waited. 10 minutes, 20. The sun climbed higher. The chickens scratched in the dirt. Blue came up beside him, whined low in his throat. Through the window he could see her, sitting at the table. The letter open in front of her, not moving, just staring at it. An hour passed. She was still sitting. He went in to start supper. She didn't look up when he came through the door. Her face was white, bloodless. The letter lay flat on the table. 2 pages of close writing. He built up the fire, put on beans, made coffee, set the table. 2 plates, 2 cups. She didn't move. "Supper's ready." Nothing. "Clara." She blinked, looked at him like she was seeing through glass, through walls, through everything to something far away he couldn't reach. She folded the letter, creased it careful, put it in her apron pocket, stood, sat at her place, picked up her fork, ate 3 bites, set her fork down, stared at her plate. Silas ate. The beans had no taste, might as well have been eating sawdust. The silence pressed down on both of them. Heavy. Suffocating. After. He cleared the plates. She sat. He washed. She sat. The lamp burned lower. She sat. Finally she stood. Walked outside. Didn't close the door behind her. Silas finished the dishes. Hung the towel. Waited. She didn't come back. He found her on the porch, sitting in one of the ladder-back chairs. No lamp, just stars overhead, and darkness pressing close. He sat in the other chair. Didn't speak. Didn't touch her. Just sat. Long quiet. Cicadas starting up in the mesquite. Coyotes howling somewhere south. The night sounds filling the space between them. Finally her voice came. Flat. Dead. My sister. Elizabeth. She wrote. She pulled the letter from her pocket. Held it. Didn't open it. They found Thomas's grave. His mother put up a stone. Her hands tightened on the paper. It says Thomas Hayes, beloved son, taken by fever and a wife's neglect. The words hung in the air. Poison. Spreading. They carved it in marble. My name's not on it. But everyone in Dayton knows. Everyone knows his mother thinks I killed him. Her voice cracked. She stopped, swallowed. Elizabeth says people cross the street when they see her coming. Won't speak to her in church. Because she's my sister. Because she defended me when Thomas died. The letter crumpled in her fists. He got sick on a Tuesday. Typhoid. The doctor said, by Thursday his fever was 104. Friday he couldn't keep water down. Saturday morning he was. She couldn't finish. Her breathing went ragged. Fast. Like she was drowning. Silas stayed in his chair, every muscle tight, wanting to reach for her, knowing he couldn't. Not yet. His mother screamed at me, at his funeral, said if I'd been a better wife, if I'd prayed harder, if I'd loved him more. The good Lord wouldn't have taken him. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. Said I was a curse, said death followed me, said any man who took me to wife would end up in the ground. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. I believed her. I stood there in my mourning dress, and I believed every word. Because maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't pray hard enough. Maybe I didn't love him the way a wife should. Maybe if I'd been better, stronger, more faithful, maybe he'd still be breathing. She folded the letter, unfolded it, folded it again. Her fingers working without purpose. I left Ohio in the night, didn't say goodbye to Elizabeth, didn't pack anything but one bag. Just ran. Came west because I couldn't stand to see their faces anymore. Couldn't stand to see myself in the mirror knowing what I'd done. You didn't do anything. Silas's voice came out rough, hard. You don't know that. I know typhoid fever. Knew 14 people who died of it in one summer. Good people. Prayed every night people. Died anyway. Prayer don't stop fever. Love don't stop fever. Nothing stops it once it gets hold. Clara shook her head. You don't understand. I understand running. Understand thinking you killed someone with your not enough. She looked at him then. First time since the letter came. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. Silas leaned back in his chair, looked up at the stars, all those cold points of light. Sarah died birthing our daughter. I told you that. Didn't tell you the rest. His hands gripped the chair arms, wood grain digging into his palms. Labor started at dawn. Normal at first. Midwife came around noon. By evening, something was wrong. Baby wouldn't come. Wouldn't turn. Sarah was screaming, begging me to do something. To save the baby. To save her. To make it stop. His voice was shaking now. He couldn't steady it. Midwife said one of them might live if we cut. But Sarah was too weak for cutting, said they'd both die, said all we could do was wait. The stars blurred. He blinked hard. Sarah grabbed my hand, looked at me, said, "Don't let our baby die alone in the dark. Promise me." So I promised. I promised her. His throat closed. He had to force the words out. She died at midnight. Baby came an hour later, already blue, already gone. I held her anyway, kept my promise. She didn't die alone. He stopped, couldn't go on. I named her Grace, after Sarah's mother, wrapped her in Sarah's wedding dress, put them both in the same coffin because I couldn't separate them. His hands were fists now, knuckles white. For 10 years I've thought if I'd made the midwife cut sooner, if I'd ridden for the doctor in town even though it was 20 miles, if I'd prayed different or harder or— He shook his head. If I'd been a better husband, a stronger man, someone worth keeping alive for. The silence after was absolute. Even the cicadas had stopped. Clara's voice came soft. Broken. I don't know how to stay when everyone I stay for dies. Yeah. Silas looked at his hands. I don't know how to let anyone stay. Keep thinking if I don't let them close. I can't lose them. Does it work? No. You just lose them slower. Hurts the same. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them, made herself small in the chair. His mother was right. I am a curse. You should send me away before— Stop! She went quiet. You're not a curse. You're just alive when someone you loved ain't. That's not sin. That's just the way things fall sometimes. You don't believe that. I'm trying to— They sat. The night deepened. The Milky Way stretched overhead. All those stars that didn't care about people dying or living or anything in between. Clara uncurled. Put her feet back on the porch boards. Her voice was barely audible. I answered your letter because it said no promises. Everyone else wanted a wife. You just wanted help with a house. She looked at him. I thought I could do that. Thought I could keep my heart locked up and just work, just survive. Thought if I didn't care about you, I couldn't kill you. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading. But I'm caring anyway, she whispered, and I'm terrified. Silas's chest tightened. His ribs couldn't expand enough, couldn't get enough air. He should tell her to leave. Should protect her from whatever was broken in him that made people die. Should send her away before she got hurt. Instead, he said, I'm terrified too. She turned her head, looked at him full on. Of what? That you'll stay, that you'll leave, that I'll wake up one morning and you'll be— He couldn't finish. Dead. Gone. Either way. Clara stood, walked to the edge of the porch, gripped the post there. Her shoulders were shaking. I don't know what to do, she said. Don't know how to be alive when being alive means loving people who die. Silas stood, crossed to where she stood, didn't touch her. Just stood close enough that she'd know he was there. We just keep breathing, he said. Keep getting up. Keep setting 2 plates on the table even when it feels like a lie. And if they die anyway, then we bury them. And keep breathing. She turned. Her face was inches from his. He could see the tracks tears had left on her cheeks. Could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear he carried every day. I'm staying, she said, voice fierce now, angry. I'm staying, and if you die on me, I'll never forgive you. You hear me?" Something in his chest cracked open. "Broke. Let light in. I hear you. And I'm planting that whole garden, every seed. And if they die, I'll plant them again. And again. Until something lives. Okay. Okay." She wiped her face with her sleeve. Looked at him. "You're not allowed to die either. I'll try. You better." They stood there. Two people who'd lost everything. Two people who were trying to hold something anyway. Clara moved first. Walked back to her chair, sat down. Silas sat beside her. They stayed there until the stars started to fade, until the sky went gray in the east, until the rooster crowed and the chickens started moving in their coop. Neither of them slept. Neither of them spoke again. When the sun came up, Clara stood, went inside, started the coffee. Silas sat on the porch another minute. The letter was on the chair arm where she'd left it. He picked it up, looked at the handwriting, the words that had brought death back into this house. He walked to the stove, opened the door, dropped the letter in, watched it burn. Clara stood beside him, watched it too. The paper curled, blackened, turned to ash. When it was gone, she poured coffee, handed him a cup. Their fingers touched on the handle. Neither pulled away. Morning came gray. Silas's eyes felt like someone had rubbed sand in them. Neither of them had slept. Clara moved through the kitchen making coffee, her face pale, her hands steady on the pot. They didn't speak. What was there to say after a night like that? He went out to check the stock. The chickens were restless, bunched in the corner of the coop instead of spreading out. Betty wouldn't come when he scattered grain, just stayed pressed against the wall, clucking low. Blue was worse. The dog paced circles around the yard, stopping every few feet to bark at nothing. At the sky. His hackles were up. Silas walked to the fence line. The air felt wrong, heavy, pressing down on his shoulders like a wet blanket. His shirt stuck to his back even though the sun wasn't up proper yet. He looked west. Sky was the wrong color, yellow-green, like a bruise forming on skin. His father had taught him to read weather. Green sky meant one thing. He ran for the house. Clara was at the stove, stirring grits. She looked up when he burst through the door. "Storm cellar," he said. "Now." "What? Tornado weather. We gotta get underground." Her face went white. She stepped back from the stove. "I can't. You can. Come on." He grabbed her wrist. She pulled against him. "No, I can't go down there. I can't. It's like being buried. I can't." The wind hit, came from nowhere. The kitchen window rattled in its frame. Outside, the mesquite tree bent sideways, branches scraping the ground. Silas dragged her toward the door. She fought him, dug her heels in. Her free hand grabbed the doorframe. "Please," she said. "Please don't make me." Thunder cracked. So close the house shook. The window glass rattled harder. "We go down or we die up here. Choose." He pulled. She came loose from the doorframe, stumbled after him into the yard. The wind screamed, dust and debris flying horizontal. Something metal tore loose from the barn roof, crashed into the fence. The cellar door was 20 feet away. Slanted boards set into the ground behind the house. Silas hauled it open. Stone steps leading down into darkness. Clara stopped at the top, shaking her head. I can't breathe down there. You will. I'll help you. He went down first, pulled her after him. She was sobbing now, gasping. He got her down 3 steps, 4, 5. The cellar door slammed shut above them. The crossbar dropped, locked them in. Total darkness. Clara's breathing went ragged, fast, panicked. Silas felt along the shelf, found the candle. The matches struck one. The flame caught. Yellow light pushed back the dark, but not far. Clara was pressed against the wall, eyes wide, chest heaving. "Can't breathe," she gasped. "Can't, it's too small, I can't. Look at me." She didn't. Couldn't. Staring at nothing, at everything, at the dirt walls closing in. He grabbed her shoulders, forced her to face him. "Look at me. Clara, look at my face." Her eyes found his. Wild. Terrified. "You're not buried. You're breathing. Tell me 5 things you see." I can't." Thunder shook the earth. Jars rattled on the shelves. Dust rained down from the timber ceiling. 5 things. Say them." Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "Candle." Her voice came out broken. Shattered. Your face. Shelf. Jar of beans. Dirt." "Good. What do you hear?" "Thunder. Your voice. My heart. It's too loud. You're here. You're alive. Storm's up there. We're down here. Safe." He kept talking. Couldn't stop. Words pouring out to fill the space, to give her something to hold on to besides fear. Told her about his father's ranch before the fever came. 2,000 head of cattle stretching across 3 sections of land. Told her about his mother who couldn't carry a tune but sang anyway while she kneaded bread. Told her about the first horse he broke, a bay mare that threw him 7 times before she let him stay on. Overhead the wind screamed. Something crashed, kept crashing. The barn, maybe. The house. Everything they'd built. Clara pressed against him. Not romantic. Survival. Her fingers dug into his shirt. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, held her. She was shaking so hard her teeth rattled. "Talk to me," she whispered against his chest. "Keep talking. Please." So he told her about Sarah. She laughed at my bad jokes, even the ones that weren't funny, especially those, said I told them just to see if she'd laugh anyway. Clara's shaking slowed. Not much, a little. She sang off key, knew it too, sang anyway. Said the chickens didn't mind, and they were the only ones listening. The wind shrieked. Timber groaned overhead. Clara flinched against him. She wasn't afraid of anything except spiders. Big ones, little ones, didn't matter. She'd climb on a chair and make me kill them, even though she was the one who could shoot a rattlesnake at 20 paces. Something massive hit the ground above them. The whole cellar shook. Clara made a sound in her throat. Animal. Trapped. When she died. His voice broke. He swallowed. Kept going. When she died, she asked me to save the baby. Kept asking, begging. I couldn't do nothing. Just held her hand and watched them both. He couldn't finish. His throat closed. Clara's hand found his, gripped it, hard. "Thomas collected rocks," she said. Her voice was steadier now. Kept them in jars, labeled everyone, where he found it, what kind it was, had 30 jars when he died. His mother threw them out after, said they were taking up space. Thunder rolled. Constant now, no break between crashes. He could fix anything with wire and prayer, broken chair, leaky roof. Once he fixed a wagon wheel with nothing but baling twine and stubbornness. Her breathing was evening out, matching his. He got sick on a Tuesday. By Saturday he was gone. Burned up so fast I didn't have time to say goodbye proper. To tell him I was sorry for being a bad wife. For not praying hard enough. You weren't a bad wife. His mother said his mother was wrong. Silence. Just the storm overhead. Tearing, destroying, taking everything. Clara's voice came quiet. I woke up a widow and didn't know how to be alive without him. Didn't want to be. His family made sure I knew I'd killed him. Made sure everyone knew. Silas held her tighter. You didn't kill anyone. You just surfened when he didn't. That's not murder. That's just bad luck. Is that what you tell yourself about Sarah? He thought about that. Long quiet. No. I tell myself I murdered her by not being good enough, strong enough, man enough to save her. And is that true? No. Then why do we believe it? He didn't have an answer. They sat in the darkness, holding each other. The storm raged above, tearing apart everything they'd built, everything they'd tried to become. Finally, the wind stopped. Sudden. Complete. Like someone had closed a door. The silence after was worse than the noise. Silas stood, pushed on the cellar door. It didn't budge. Something heavy on top of it. He pushed harder. The door shifted, lifted, debris sliding off. He shoved it all the way open. Sunlight flooded in. Afternoon light. Wrong angle. They'd been down there hours. He climbed out, turned, reached down for Clara. She took his hand, let him pull her up into the light. They stood in the yard. What used to be the yard. The barn roof was gone, completely, torn off and scattered across the pasture in twisted sheets of metal. The fence was down, every post snapped or uprooted, rails scattered like kindling. The chicken coop had lost its north wall. The chickens were gone, scattered or dead. He couldn't tell. And the garden. Clara walked toward it, slow, like she was walking toward a grave. The rows were gone, torn up. Plants ripped out by roots and flung across the yard. The stakes he'd made were bent, twisted, broken. She stood at the edge of what used to be 8 rows of green. Silas waited. This was it. The moment she'd realized staying was pointless, that everything they built would just get torn down again, that death followed them both, and trying to outrun it was foolish. She'd leave now. Had to. Only made sense. Clara knelt, started digging through debris with her hands, pushing aside broken stakes, torn plants, mud. Her hands stopped. She pulled something free, one tomato plant, broken stem, roots still intact, dirt clinging to them. She looked at it, turned it in her hands, then looked up at him. Might survive if we replant it now. His throat closed. Couldn't speak. She stood. Held the plant careful. Well, you gonna help me or just stand there? Something in his chest broke open, cracked apart. Let something in he'd thought was dead. Yeah, he managed. I'll help. She nodded. Started clearing a space in the torn-up earth, making room, making rows. Silas knelt beside her, started digging, his hands in the mud next to hers. Both of them covered in dirt. Both of them choosing to stay, to rebuild, to try again even though the storm might come back, even though everything might get torn apart again. But for now they had one plant, one chance, and that was enough. They worked until sunset, replanted what could be saved. 3 tomato plants, 1 row of beans, a handful of squash. When it was done, Clara stood, looked at the house. The roof was intact. The patch had held. Then she looked at him, mud on her face, exhaustion in her eyes, but something else too, something that looked like determination. "We're gonna need help," she said. "Fixing the barn, the fence. All of it. I know. Think your neighbors would come." "Might, if I asked." She nodded. "Then ask." He looked at her. This woman who'd survived her husband's death and his family's blame and 2,000 miles of running. This woman who was choosing to stay, to build, to risk everything again. "Why?" he asked. "Why stay after this?" Clara looked at the garden, the 3 plants they'd saved, the rows they'd remade. "Because giving up is easier," she said, "and I'm tired of easy." She walked to the house, started pumping water to wash the mud off. Silas stood in the ruined yard, looked at everything the storm had taken, then looked at what remained. The house, the woman, 3 tomato plants. It was more than he'd had yesterday, more than he'd had in 10 years. And he realized he didn't want her to leave anymore. He wanted her to stay. Not for 6 months, not for a trial, forever. 2 days after the storm, Silas was dragging sheet metal from the pasture when he heard wagons. 3 of them, coming from the east road. He straightened, shaded his eyes. The Hendersons in front, Tuckers behind them, Abernathy's bringing up the rear. All 3 wagons loaded with lumber, tools, food. Clara came out of the house, saw them coming, looked at Silas. "You send word?" "No." The wagons pulled into the yard. Old Man Henderson climbed down first, surveyed the damage, the barn roof gone, the fence in splinters, nodded once. "Figured you'd need help." He didn't wait for an answer. Started unloading lumber. The other men followed. Tucker and his 2 sons. Abernathy with his brother-in-law. The women climbed down carrying baskets. Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Tucker, young Mrs. Abernathy with a baby on her hip. Mrs. Henderson walked straight to Clara, looked her up and down. "You the new wife." Clara's back straightened. "I'm Clara Hayes." "Well, Clara Hayes, you got a kitchen that works." "Yes, ma'am." "Then let's get these men fed proper." She handed Clara a basket heavy with bread and preserves. "I'm Martha. You need help, or you got this?" Clara took the basket. "I got this?" Martha nodded. "Good. Hate a woman who can't manage her own kitchen." By noon, the men had the barn roof framed. Silas worked alongside Henderson's youngest son, hammering joists into place. Sweat ran into his eyes. His shoulders burned. But the work felt good. Solid. Real. Below. Clara moved between the kitchen and the yard, carrying food. Cornbread, beans, coffee. The women helped, but she led. Her kitchen. Her house. Nobody questioned it. At midday break, the men sat in the shade of what was left of the barn. Clara brought water. Silas watched her pour for Henderson. Then Tucker. She moved like she'd done this 100 times. Comfortable. Sure. Mrs. Henderson was watching too. She caught Silas's eye. Nodded approval. By evening, the barn roof was on. Not pretty, but solid. Would keep the rain out. The men started on the fence, resetting posts, stringing wire, working until the light failed. The women set out supper on planks laid across sawhorses, fried chicken, biscuits, gravy, pickles, 3 different pies. Clara sat beside Silas on the ground, their backs against the house, too tired to make conversation. The neighbors talked around them, stories about other storms, other rebuildings, the rhythm of it familiar, comfortable. Henderson's son asked about the garden. Silas felt Clara go still beside him. "Storm took most of it," Silas said. "Saved 3 plants." "That's 3 more than 0, Henderson said. "You'll build it back." Clara's hand rested on the ground between her and Silas, close enough their fingers almost touched. Day 2, they finished the fence. Day 3, they patched the chicken coop, fixed the porch steps, replaced broken window glass. By evening of the 3rd day, the neighbors were packing up. Henderson shook Silas's hand. "You got yourself a good woman there." Silas looked at Clara on the porch, saying goodbye to the women. "I know. Don't let her get away. Wasn't planning to." Henderson grinned. "Good." The wagons rolled out. Dust settled. Silas and Clara stood in the yard watching them disappear down the east road. The sun was dropping. Orange light painting everything gold. The new barn roof gleamed. The fence posts stood straight. The house waited behind them, solid and real. Clara walked to the porch, sat on the steps they'd fixed that morning. Silas followed, sat beside her, long quiet, the kind that didn't need filling. Finally, Silas spoke. "That 6-month trial. That was a stupid idea." Clara went still. "I don't want to wait. You want to stay for real, or you want to go? Need to know." She turned to look at him. The evening light caught in her eyes, made them green instead of gray. "I set 2 plates on that table the first night," she said. "Been setting 2 every night since. You think I was planning to leave?" "Might have been." "Well, I wasn't." She looked back at the yard. At the garden plot where 3 tomato plants were already reaching for the sky. "I'm staying." "For how long?" "Long as you'll have me." His throat tightened. "What if I want you here permanent?" "Then I guess that's settled." She said it simple, easy, like they were discussing fence posts or crop rotation, but her hands were shaking in her lap. Silas reached over, took one of her hands in his. Her fingers were rough, calloused, real. "Settled then," he said. They sat on the porch steps holding hands while the sun went down. Neither spoke. Didn't need to. The agreement hung between them, solid as the new fence posts. The next morning, Silas woke before dawn, dressed quiet, went out to the porch while Clara slept. He pulled his pocket knife from his pants, opened the blade, looked up at the beam above the door, started carving. The wood was hard, old cottonwood, dried for years. The blade bit shallow. He worked slow, careful, 1 letter at a time. Garrett. He'd carved that 10 years ago, when he first built this house with Sarah. His name, his claim. Below it, he started carving again. C. Garrett. The sun came up while he worked. The light changed from gray to pink to gold. His hand cramped. He switched the knife to his left hand, kept going. When he finished, he stepped back, blew the wood dust away. 2 names, side by side, carved into the beam above the threshold. The door opened. Clara came out. still in her night dress, hair loose around her shoulders. She saw what he'd done. Walked to the beam, reached up, traced the letters with her fingertips. C. Garrett. Her hand dropped. She looked at him. "That official enough for you?" he asked. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "Yeah, that'll do." She went inside. Came back dressed. "We should go to town. Need supplies if I'm going to replant that garden proper." They hitched the wagon. Clara sat close on the bench. Close enough their shoulders touched. He clicked his tongue. The horse started forward. The ride to town took 2 hours. They didn't talk much. Didn't need to. The silence between them had changed, settled, comfortable, in town. They moved through the general store together. Clara ordered flour by the barrel, not the pound, salt by the 50-pound sack, seeds for every vegetable she could think of. The clerk looked at Silas. "That'll run you near $30. Put it on my account." Clara bought fabric, blue cotton for curtains, thread, needles, a new wash basin to replace the cracked one. They loaded the wagon. Silas drove through town slow. People watched, nodded. Mrs. Henderson waved from the mercantile porch. At the edge of town, Clara put her hand on Silas's arm. "Stop a minute." He pulled up. She looked back at the buildings. The church, the saloon, the general store. "First time I've been here in daylight," she said. "Came in on the stage at night. Too scared to look around." "What do you think? Think it looks like home." She settled back against the seat. Silas's arm went around her shoulders. Natural, easy, right. They rode south. The sun was dropping behind them, casting their shadow long across the road ahead. The wagon creaked. The horse plodded steady. The supplies shifted in the bed behind them. A mile from home. Clara sat up straight, pointed. "Look!" The desert was blooming, rain-washed and new. Prickly pear cactus covered in yellow flowers. Indian paintbrush splashing red across the gray-green scrub. Desert marigolds bobbing in the breeze. Life springing up where there'd been nothing but dust and death 2 weeks ago. Silas pulled the wagon to a stop. They sat looking at it. All that color. All that life. "It's beautiful," Clara whispered. "Yeah." She turned to him. "Thank you." "For what? For letting me stay? For carving my name? For—" She stopped, started again. "For being brave enough to try again." His hand found hers, held tight. "You're the brave one. I just stopped running." We both stopped running. The sun dropped lower. The flowers glowed in the angled light, red and yellow against endless sky. Silas clicked his tongue. The horse started forward. They rolled toward home. Toward the house with 2 names carved above the door. Toward the garden with 3 tomato plants reaching for the sun. Toward the life they were building together. One day, one choice, one plate at a time. Clara leaned against him. His arm stayed around her shoulders. The wagon wheels turned. The horizon opened before them. And for the first time in 10 years, Silas looked toward the future and didn't see death waiting there. He saw home. There's something heavy about watching 2 people choose each other after they've already buried everyone they loved. Not the happy kind of heavy, the kind that sits in your chest and won't quite leave. That's what this story carries. I think That weight of trying again when trying again feels like asking for another breaking. Many of us know what it is to lose someone and wonder if we caused it somehow. If we didn't pray hard enough, love well enough, fight hard enough to keep them breathing. We carry that quiet, don't we? That wondering. Clara carried it from Ohio. Silas carried it for 10 years in a house that echoed, and maybe some of you listening carry it too. That particular kind of alone that comes from surviving when someone else didn't. The story doesn't tie up clean. Clara's still afraid. Silas still wakes up expecting loss. The garden might fail again. The storm might come back. We don't get certainty just two people setting plates on a table and calling that faith. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it's allowed to be unresolved and still be real. Thank you for sitting with this, for staying through the hard parts and the quiet parts both.